So I think a lot of people want to know, what is the definition of submission? Does it mean subservient? Does it mean control? Does it mean being told what to do? Because I think those are some common misconceptions of the word.
Welcome to Unpopular Opinion with Mac and Hay, where we're all about challenging cultural narratives with biblical wisdom. We'll dive into tough topics and unpack lies we've been told. So grab your coffee, open your Bible, and get ready to rethink the world around you, one unpopular opinion at a time.
In today's episode, we're going to talk about something really controversial.
Submission. I think it really relates more to trusting. Because if you're not trusting each other and you don't, the Bible in multiple parts, a wife is supposed to submit to her husband. But as a man, we're supposed to love our wives as Christ loved the church, which is a huge, huge deal. It's not just submitting. We're supposed to be able to give our lives for you. But in that, the reason that it talks about submission / trusting, which is one and the same. And I think that a lot of people get that word mixed up, and society tells you, I'm not submitting to no man.
I can say that I definitely was one of those women. Like, I'm not going to submit to a man because I didn't think that men could lead. Or I wasn't attracting men who would lead because I would run them over. And I'd be really stuck in my way of, it's my way or the highway, and I rule this roost. And honestly, it came from a place of hurt. It came from a place where I was very, very vulnerable, and I trusted someone before and they led me astray. And I told myself I wasn't gonna have that happen anymore, ever. So that's where I came up with this boss babe concept. And I was like, yeah, like I could take care of things myself. And I did really, really well. I mean, $500,000 is a lot of success in my life. And, I owned homes and owned my dream car, and I did really well, but I was still miserable inside because I was still lacking the understanding of what love was and what trust was. And if I was really honest with myself, I wasn't trusting myself at all. Not really.
Because you weren't submitting to God either.
Mm-mm.
Because those are worldly things. And see, when you come down to it, if you're not submitting / if you're trusting, I want to push that more, because if you say submission, it's gotten such a bad name. Slave. Can we even say that on there? I mean, these days, like, good gracious alive, like, when you're talking about that word, submit, like, people think that it's just about, like, I'm only to do what you tell me to do. But that's not the case. As a man, a man's supposed to love his wife as Christ loved the church. That doesn't mean I rule over you, as in I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to communicate with you. I'm not going to, put you on this pedestal just beneath Christ, because that's how it should be. It should be a way to grow together. But as long as you have the center as Christ, we each fall off on our own way. And so if I start lagging, if I start not doing as close to Christ, well, automatically that's going to lead you astray, because I'm no longer trying to be the head of the household. How can I be the head of the household if I'm not actively seeking God's face?
I love what you brought up about trust, because I think that's 99.9% of it. Because if I can't trust you to lead me in a good direction, I'm going to want to take control of that. And I'm going to get an ego around it and that masculine energy that everybody talks about. And I'm going to want to rule the roost. And I'm used to ruling the roost. And so that was really challenging for me to take a step back and say, okay, I'll let you lead. But I also feel heard in the process too. And I think that's really, really, really important.
Well, because I don't discredit what you say, and I actually lift you up as a, as you say, boss babes. Like, I believe that that's okay. It's okay to lift you on that pedestal as a boss babe. It's okay. I'm not ashamed or upset, or if there's a way to lift you up, because it's lifting your spirits, it's letting you be yourself. Who am I to tell you who you are? I'm supposed to embrace who you are because that's who I care about. That's who I love. That's who I want to be with. So I'm not going to snuff out your light, but we're supposed to be actively learning about each other. Like, you're not the same person that you were a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and for goodness sakes, you're definitely not 10 years ago. I mean, nobody is. So when it comes down to it, you have to constantly learn about one another, and communicate is a huge thing, even when it's uncomfortable. And I think that's the big thing. I mean, there's some times where, it's something you don't want to talk about. And it's like, but I know if I don't talk about it, it's going to sit and fester, and it's going to plant a seed in our relationship that doesn't need to be there. It needs to, we only need to plant roses, not weeds.
I love roses.
I love roses. I know you love roses. I get a rose for you every week.
You can chop that thing down to the very bare root, but it still comes back, and it comes back more beautiful. And I feel really supported by you. I feel really safe. And safety is really key in here. And I think did you see that meme that's going around, or that video that's going around? And it's like, women, would you choose a man in the woods, or would you choose a bear? And a lot of women choose a bear. And I totally get where they're coming from too, because it's like, well, that bear can protect me more than today's men. But I want to tell you that there are good men out there. You just can't have mine. There are men out there that know how to be men, that know how to protect. And honestly, as a society, we need to lift men up, I think, because especially women, I was one of those women who would put men down and be like, oh, you're not worth anything. And, you are living in a basement with your mom.
Likewise, I was the same. I'm not a perfect man by any means. At the same time, before I really started following God, I was lost and astray. And I mean, I was not the person who I even wanted to be. But the problem is that a lot of it goes back to our raising, and you can't sit there and focus on the negative parts of your life and think that you're going to be able to succeed from it if you're not actively trying to fix that problem. So when it came down to it, like, whether it's funny or not funny in y'all's relationships, and I see this so many times with friends of ours, that where they joke about calling their spouse if it's not something cute and funny like babe, honey, sugar, yes, sugar muffin. Like, if it's not actively part of a way to lift each other up, and it's demeaning in any way, it doesn't matter if it's a small one. It doesn't even matter if it's as a joke, it's not funny.
Yeah.
And words mean more than any physical act.
What would you say to the couples who have that as one of their love language? They identify
Words of affirmation.
well, especially, but they banter back and forth, and that's their love language. But there's an undertone there. So what would you say to those couples?
I'd say ultimately that ends up, it's not going to last. A reason I say this is because it may last in certain circumstances. At the same time, I don't believe that it's actively going to put you above into that, euphoric love. I think that it's going to limit you, because you're always going to be picking at each other. And it's okay to have fun with each other and tickle, or, scare each other every once in a while. I mean, that's not a bad thing as long as it's done in love. At the same time, you can do that without verbally, you know, I'd say verbally assaulting in a way. Like, was that our BF resting? Yeah,
Mhm.
our resting B face.
Yes.
You used to say that, and I did. What did I say? I don't like it. I don't like that because you're talking about, my other half, and I don't want the other half of me to be even remotely referred to as that, because I don't want to be treated that way. I am words of affirmation. Acts of service is my second. And so I know that. I've studied that book, and it is amazing. If y'all have not read The Five Love Languages and actively tried to follow some of the stuff and learn about each other, even if it's just on your own, if you're single, it's good to know.
Yeah, and they have different versions. They have one for families, they have one for military, they have all kinds. I love the 5 little languages for sure.
But I also think it's a snowball effect if you're talking like that to your significant other. I think it starts out as cute and funny until you get into an argument. Just takes one argument, and then you're like, "Oh, well, I say this to you all the time, and you don't get mad."
I think it's
The
can also
intent.
be a gateway and
Yep.
open the door to abusiveness.
Yes, wholeheartedly. And then, but at the same time, it also leads to talking behind each other's backs because you don't feel like you can actively communicate with your partner. So what do? You go to your friends and you say, I don't know why he treats me this way. Instead of going to him and saying, I really don't like the way you've been treating me. You know, at the same time, we also don't want to go to each other in a way that says, um, that's aggressive, because if you're going to somebody that in an aggressive way, you're going to get a defense mechanism. And I don't think that you should bring that kind of stuff up while somebody else is bringing up a situation, because you're not listening to hear, you're listening to respond. So anytime that your significant other comes up to you and says something like, that really affected me that you did that, you can't rebuttal and say, well, if you hadn't have done this, because you're not listening. You didn't even hear what she said or he said. And then what happens to that? You end up shutting down because you don't feel heard. Like you said, you don't feel heard.
Yeah, there has to be a point where you have to listen to understand, to seek to understand instead of reply, like you said, or respond. I think a lot of the times that we do that, we sit there and we formulate this response in our head and we do this checklist and it's a debate.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to be heard more than our partner, and we can completely miss the mark on it. We'll listen to words, but we'll interpret it through our filters. And our filters, if we're coming in from a filter with hurt, we're going to hear hurt. And there's sometimes that we have discussions where it's like I say something and then you take it out of context, or you say something and I take it out of context. But the beauty about us and our communication is that we listen to each other and we seek to understand first. We might get a little emotional and we take the proper steps to do that, whether it's be space or just take a breather, take a deep breath in, and then restart the conversation, or at least go back to the original point. And I think is most importantly in our conversations, we focus on one thing at a time. We don't bring in other things to complicate the communication, which is what I love. And if we start to do that, it's like, wait, we're going to talk about this later, but let's address this first.
Mm-hmm. I agree. But back to the subject of submission, though, because I do want to veer back to the submission part, because being a woman in a Christian marriage where you're talking about submission, it means that the woman is going to submit and the man is going to get the last word, like the last overall what's going to happen. And that takes a lot of trust. That takes a lot of trust from the woman. So I understand where a lot of women are like, no, because, you know, but then if you say no to your man, I question how much do you actually trust your man to make the decision that he's going to make?
Well, my question further is, why would you choose that man? Or do you feel stuck with that man? Because a lot of women do. They make a choice and they're like, hey, this great guy comes into my life and I accept him. But then the guy doesn't accept her, or she doesn't fully understand what kind of man he is. And that's why you have to take your time in the very beginning and see, what is it about me that's attracting this type of man?
Well, I mean, the Bible says, guard your heart. Above all else, guard your heart, because your heart can be led astray. But if you're actively seeking God's face and you're following the word and you're looking for a godly man, you're looking for a man that's going to put your needs and your needs above your wants, most of all. A lot of times that there's a big difference between needs and wants. Like, you know, ladies, you don't
have a Ferrari.
ladies, you don't need to do your nails if your bills are due. If you're actively, if your man is looking at you and saying, honey, we have this goal I want to get to, and he says, the nails, maybe we need to stop doing them every week. We'll do them every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. That way we can come up with a happy agreement. And if you buck him on that, then how are you going to help this unity grow in the goals that you have?
It was also a compromise, because if I can't do my nails every week or 2 weeks, it's usually 2 weeks, then you can't buy car parts for 2 weeks either.
Can't buy car parts. Hey, unless it's an absolute have to have because the vehicle's not going to run, or let's just say a new boots, or for a man, video games. Men, get off of them. You're grown men. Get off the video games. Grown men do not need to be soaked into a video game. I'm going to say it because you know what? If you're so wrapped up in that video game, you're not wrapped up in your wife. Tough stuff. Hate to say it. And I enjoyed video games for a long time. At the same time, I know that was one of the things that actually kept me from listening. It kept me from listening because I would be on it. I mean, you randomly get wrapped up in it for 4 or 5, 6 hours and you blink and you're like, it's dark outside. Or you're not, let's just say you're not being able to help your spouse around the house. And then they're like, your spouse will be like, the house is not clean. Why don't we do it together? I mean, the small things you can do together. And men, just because you go to work and your wife stays home with the kids doesn't mean that when you come home that you don't take care of your kids and your wife and your significant other in general. You should still find time even when you're tired. That's what makes you a good man. Like, sometimes you come home and you've been working for 16 plus hours, your kids still want you. Your kids see you on this pedestal, but they only see your wife or your significant other all day.
So I think a lot of people want to know, what is the definition of submission? Does it mean subservient? Does it mean control? Does it mean being told what to do? Because I think those are some common misconceptions of the word. It doesn't mean that you're chained to the oven 24/7.
It legitimately, it equals trusting. It equals trusting, because if you can't, when you put your trust in somebody or God or anything, if you put your trust in it, that means that my whole heart, I believe that you're going to make the right decision for us. And if you're not in that place, it doesn't mean that you can't question the choice. I mean, It doesn't mean that you're gonna question that choice. It just means that you're gonna trust that that person is gonna make the best decision for the family. But giving that man the role to do that is a big deal. I mean, any man out there, if you get off games and you're actively trying to work on your relationships and you're trying to build your spouse up, it doesn't matter what she says as far as like, because you haven't been doing this the whole time. You may just be starting on something like this, but it doesn't mean that you don't stop just because they're not receiving it. You're trying to rebuild a broken relationship or something like that. Because if you're watching this podcast, you're most likely because you're coming to Christ and you're learning about these things, in which, trust me, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. But if you continuously do it, they will reciprocate, because it's natural for a woman to want to feel loved and cherished and understood. Men are not, quote, nurturers, but even as far back as, whether it was David cried to God, he prayed constantly, he loved with all his heart, he was a man after God's own heart. I mean, but he was also a warrior. He would definitely go to battle without worries.
I think part of David's gift is that he was so emotional that he could have that faith and that trust because he knew he could feel the love and what that is. And that's kind of what I think submission is for me as a woman. It's almost like a dance. We're dancing together. It's teamwork. You listen to me, but I respond to you in the end. And so it's a teamwork up to a specific point, but you're leading because God's leading you. And if you were to stop that connection between you and God and not allow him to lead you, I don't know if I would trust you as deep as I do, because I know you're not perfect. I don't expect perfection out of you either. I know God's perfect. And I do know that your heart always seeks to do what's right and what is in the betterment of the family and whatever is best for me, the kids, and our entire family as a whole. And it even extends beyond the family. It extends to our community as well. And I really love that because it gives me that safety, but it also takes the pressure off. I don't have to do it myself, because I felt when I was doing it myself, it was like, I don't even know how to describe it into words. It was almost like I was working 26 jobs for 70 million hours and like no days off. And it was hard. It was really tough, and I felt like I needed that support. And that's why I prayed to God, and I was like, God, help, because I don't know.
I was just thinking about a prime example of a great way to start, like taking the lead on something is if you ask your spouse, as a man, you ask your spouse, honey, what would you like to eat for dinner? She's like, I don't know. And you give her an option of, hey, would you like, steak? No. At that point, that's when you stop and you say, we're going here. And you leave it at that. You go to the restaurant that you choose. And you know what? She'll find something there at the restaurant that she wants to eat. I mean, it's just a given. Just start with something simple like that. And then she's going to look at you, I'm glad you brought us here. It may not be what she thought in her mind as far as like, I wanted tacos. You could always go tacos. Tamales. Like tamales, tacos, anything like that, cheese dip. I mean, it's a win-win. What I'm saying is that, start with something simple like that and then work your way up to bigger token things. But you won't get to those bigger token things, especially if the woman is the breadwinner. So let's just say that she makes more money than you. That does not put her above you in the household.
And that is a big misconception. Because if the woman takes over, her mind is more of emotional. She'll make more emotional decisions instead of talking them out. And a man will generally, a man is a one-track mind. So it's a lot easier for a man to say, this is the way we need to go. So, as a woman, do you feel that you can still be boss babe and be submissive at the same time?
Yes, I do. To a point. Yeah. So Proverbs 31. Okay. If you look at the Proverbs 31:10 woman, she has a business. She makes the textiles. She takes care of her family. She rises early. She considers a field and purchases it. And so, yeah, like in a way, she's definitely a boss babe, but it's not that masculine energy of I'm going to take over. Because if you also read it, her husband's well respected within the community. You know, he's at the gates and he's leading the family, but she is supporting the family. And I think that's really important to understand is that just because you're a stay-at-home mom doesn't mean that you don't have an important role. You do. And if you make more than your husband, that's great because it's for the betterment of the family. And some men can take it, personally of like, well, I'm not a man because my wife makes more. But honestly, at the end of the day, if you look at it biblically, I mean, she's the one that's going out and doing the business, and he is the one with the influence. He's the one that's leading the family in Titus 2.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. True that. As a woman, when you're in the relationship and you hear me say, I'm going to make the final decision and say no.
Oh, this has been a challenge. It's been a challenge because I don't like to hear the word no. You don't like to hear the word no. But at the end of the day, I trust you in your judgment that it's going to happen. And if it doesn't, then I give you grace. And we'll talk about it. Be like, okay, so this didn't happen the way that you said that it would. And my fears are X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to lay it out on the table. And I might do this beforehand. When you're saying this is the final word, I said, okay, my fears are X, Y, and Z. Just help me feel safe in this decision.
And that's very true. That's very true. I agree with that. And I do, I believe I've done pretty well doing that, like hearing you and maybe altering the decision from time to time. At the same time, what is one that I've said no to you and you're like, you wanted to go pout in the corner because you have your pout moments.
Chocolate brownies. When we're on the diet, but it's for the betterment of me, right? So if I say, honey, we're going on a diet or we're doing this fitness plan,
She says that, not me. I
And
follow suit.
like, let's do this. This is you upholding a standard and just reminding me gently, you don't do it cruelly, but you just remind me of like, hey, no, that's not what you said. And we're going to stick to this because this is what, and I like that structure deep down, even though I may not like the word no. I don't like the word no.
At the same time, you have done that towards me too, because, there's times where I want my brownies too. I mean, I'm a dude. Sometimes I just see chocolate and I don't know why. Just like, I need that. I need that in my life. You're like, don't touch. And I'm like, but babe,
It's not cheat day.
it's not cheat day. It's not cheat day. I hate that word, cheat day.
So it's a yes. It's just a not right now.
Right. Correct. It's a yes, but it's not right now. And you got to remember too, sometimes life gets in the way of, things that need to happen that can't happen. So I agree with it's not always a no. It's just a not right this second.
Or it may not be for the best. Let's find a different alternative. Instead of just saying no, and that's that.
Yeah.
Because for men, sometimes that could get really aggressive or come off as aggression. Even if their intent is not aggressive, it could come off as aggressive,
Ooh,
and that
tone.
could definitely tone.
Tone.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a huge thing. And that's kind of what I was saying. Go back to when I was saying don't bring up stuff while you're in an argument. Like you need to have that kind of a conversation in a very, very calm way, because men tend to be more like, you're going to listen to me. And that is not how you talk to a woman. Like, you're not,
That's triggering.
that's triggering for a lot of women. I mean, whether it's, because here's the thing, I'm not your daddy. I'm not your daddy. Do not call me daddy. Women, it's not cool. Like, men don't need to be called daddy. It's weird, okay? I am a dad, but I do not want to be called daddy. Like, by you at all, in any way.
I agree with that. That is kind of weird. Yeah.
I'll say it.
It's weird. I mean, there was a point in time in my life where I would give into that, but I always felt like it was kind of weird because it put you in a role of a parent-child relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I very much felt like a child when it would be daddy and baby, you know. So we're not children, and you're not my parent. You're my partner.
Well, and another thing that men need to remember in this is that, especially if you have kids, boys or girls, how you talk to your significant other or spouse is how they are going to react later. If it's boys, they're going to think that that's okay to talk to their significant others that way, even as in a relationship, before they get married or before they have kids. They're going to say, well, this is what my dad did. This is what my mom did. And for girls, they're so emotional at a young age that you're their first love. You're their first love. So what kind of man do you want your daughter to have? So if you're sitting there demeaning your significant other or her mother, she's thinking, well, that's my first love. That's my daddy.
I know for our daughters, I want strong men in the faith that can lead them, that aren't going to help or hurt them, that are going to help them just live life and they feel supported. And then for our sons, I just feel like they need to be the men that we want our daughters to have, And I hope that now that we're in the roles that we are, that can happen and that they see that and we're role models for them, because they didn't always see that during their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Because you and I come from divorced backgrounds,
Broken homes.
Broken homes, and, there's a lot that goes on with that and a lot of emotions surrounding that, a lot of hurt, a lot of traumas, but also a lot of lessons that you can take in order to heal. And for me, and I think all parents want this, is they want stability for their kids. They want to see their legacy remain strong and not die off and not be toxic. And I think, that just, it hits me to my heart, my core.
I agree. And then, we have to be chain breakers.
Yeah.
We can't continue these patterns. And if you look at your life and you see if you look at your parents, divorced or not divorced, and you look at them and you're like, this is how my relationship is turning out, and you don't like it, you're the only one that can change it. And I think that that's a big deal, because a lot of the generations don't want to change. Like, it's prideful. It's so much pride. I mean, men, it's okay to cry. There's nothing wrong with crying. There's nothing wrong with saying I'm sorry. Sometimes you may not be the one that did anything wrong. Sometimes you just got to say, I'm sorry, because you're laying down your pride, you're laying down your sword. Because if you're fighting with your significant other, like, you've already lost.
Yeah, because it's not a fight, it's a partnership, and we fight together. We stand together, and we fight the world together.
Mhm.
We don't fight each other, because a house divided will not stand.
Correct. But when you become one flesh, why would you hurt yourself?
Oh, well, that's another podcast episode, isn't it?
Yeah. Ooh, we get deep. Deep.
I love the conversations that we have together. And again, submission is not subservient.
Correct.
Submission is trusting. Submission is
Trusting and having faith in your partner or God.
Mm.
Submit to God, because you won't get anywhere without submitting to God.
Yeah.
You can't have one foot in, one foot out. It's not that way.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for listening to Unpopular Opinion with Mac and Hay. If you loved it, rate this show, take a screenshot, share it out on social media. Be sure to follow and tag us for a shout out. We love hearing your stories and how our show has impacted you.